It began with a sound no one expected to hear above the towers, a high, mosquito-like whine. The yard cameras picked up the shape first, a quadcopter drifting in from the tree line like a curious bird. In less than 10 seconds it was over the second fence, hovering, tilting, then dropping a fist-sized bundle wrapped in grey tape near the shadow of a wreck yard drain. By the time the tower officer hit the alarm, 2 inmates were already moving. They didn't look at the sky. They looked at the concrete. One glance toward a blind spot the cameras were known to miss for 3 or 4 seconds when the wind shook the pole. On the 4th second, the bundle was gone. Inside a maximum security prison, a single package can change everything. In this case, the bundle was later described in a sworn report as mixed contraband. A handful of cell phones with SIM cards, thin squares of paper soaked in a synthetic drug, and a small quantity of powder later identified as heroin. That bundle could buy months of power on the tier, debts, favors, silence. It could also buy a riot. No one found the package during the first sweep. The drone was long gone, already slipping back across the highway into the darkness. The captain ordered a yard search, then a unit-by-unit shakedown. A rumor moved faster than the search teams. It landed. It's inside. What the officers didn't know was that the drop was only the headline. The real story, the one that would take months to unravel, was about the pipeline that made the drop possible, and the people on both sides of the fence who kept that pipeline flowing. How do drugs enter a place built to keep everything out? The answers are uncomfortable and very real, shown again and again in investigative cases across the United States. Through people, through paper, through packages, and through the air. Not one method. Many. Not one group. Many. And the methods change whenever prisons adapt. The morning after the drone, Special Investigative Services, the internal unit that works with state and federal partners, pulled footage, badge logs, and mail scans. They called the state police, the postal inspectors, and a regional task force that had seen this pattern before in other institutions. Everyone knew the window. Drones don't just appear. They follow reckon, phone calls from contraband devices inside, car lights flashing from a county road at a prearranged time, or a burner phone ping near the wood line to signal now. 2 days into the lockdown, investigators found the first thread that made sense, a contraband phone taken from a cell 2 tiers away from where the bundle vanished. It had exactly 5 numbers in it, all prepaid, all recently used. One message thread was just a string of times, 212, 214, 216. The phone's gallery held 6 photos of the wreck yard fence, all taken through a pinhole in a cell window. That explained the air. But the air route is never the whole picture. Drones don't teach inmates where to stand, who to pay, or how to hide a drop in a place where you get searched twice before breakfast. Those lessons come from the people who move in and out every day, some honest, some compromised, some threatened. Across the country, real investigations have shown the same pattern. In one widely reported federal case at the Baltimore City Detention Center, prosecutors alleged that a prison gang controlled parts of the jail with help from corrupt staff. In others, from Georgia to Mississippi to New York, state and federal indictments have detailed officers who took bribes to carry in phones, drugs, or tobacco. Most officers do not. A small number do. But a small number is enough. The internal team started where every good team starts: patterns. Which staff badges pinged the same entrance the same mornings that contraband surged on a unit? Which contractors spent longer than expected inside a mechanical room adjacent to a tier? Which kitchen deliveries produced unusual packaging debris on search days? None of that is proof by itself. But patterns make questions. And good questions make cases. Next came the paper route. Over the past decade, prisons from Texas to Pennsylvania have reported a wave of drug-soaked mail, ordinary letters and greeting cards sprayed or soaked with synthetic cannabinoids, often called K2 or spice, and dried before mailing. To the eye, it looks like paper. To the person who tears a corner and chews it, it's a high. Facilities have responded by scanning mail off-site, photocopying it, or moving to digital kiosks. But while policies change, bad actors adapt, switching to legal mail if they can trick the system, or to children's drawings, or to glossy photos that hold chemicals better than plain paper. On day 5 of lockdown, the mailroom flagged 3 envelopes all routed from the same suburban post office, all addressed to different inmates on the same tier. The return addresses were different. The stamps were similar. The paper looked ordinary, too ordinary, the supervisor thought. The lab swab lit up for synthetics. Someone on the outside was painting the tier with paper. Still, the question hung in the air like the red beacon on the drone: who coordinated it? That's when the package's angle came alive. Not the drone's package, the legitimate vendor packages that arrive every day. Food service. Commissary pallets. A water heater for facilities. Investigators pulled 3 months of vendor manifests and compared them to spikes in incidents, overdoses, fights over debt, sudden clusters of brand new, identical A-buds, a classic sign that a box of phones or parts just hit the yard. They found a surge tied to a particular Friday when the institution received both a commissary pallet and a contractor tool chest. The pallet was clean. The chest had been sealed with the contractor's lock, not the institution's. That violated policy, and might be nothing. Or it might be the hinge of the entire case. Nothing in the cavity that day. Which told investigators something else. This wasn't the first time the cavity had been used. Here is what real cases have shown again and again. Pipelines are braided. Drones feed phones to revive a dead line. Paper feeds a tier while the gate tightens on staff. A compromised worker feeds one unit while a contractor feeds another. If you cut one strand, the others pull tighter. The only way to break a braided line is to track money and messages at the same time, inside and out. So they followed the money, carefully, legally, with warrants. Payment apps. Money orders. Commissary accounts overflowing because families suddenly had extra to deposit. On the outside, a handful of prepaid cards kept refilling at gas stations along the highway nearest the tree line where the drone launched. On day 10, a call came from the state police. A deputy had stopped a car weaving at 3 a.m. The driver was nervous, the trunk nearly empty, the glove box thick with prepaid debit receipts. In the back seat, a drone case with a dead battery and 4 empty rolls of electrical tape. Not a smoking gun. But smoke all the same. The driver lawyered up. The car went to impound. The prison stayed locked down. While the outside case built, inside pressure rose. Debt climbed on the tier because the package had vanished and every man who owed expected the drugs to cure his debt. Phones buzzed with threats. A fight in the shower left one inmate with a cut that needed stitches. The captain doubled the shakedowns. The warden authorized a full vendor audit. The hunger for that gray tape bundle grew by the hour. What no one expected was that the break would come from a place that had nothing to do with drones. The maintenance crew came in early on Fridays. 2 of them were assigned to a roof vent survey, a perfect, boring job that kept you out of the main traffic of the institution for hours. One of the crew had a spotless record. The other had been reprimanded once for propping a door with a paint can. Normal. Forgettable. Except the X-ray tech flagged the thermos. Thermoses go through every day. Most glow like any bottle, a cylinder, a lid, a little air. This one looked thick. The tech asked the officer to pop it. The worker smiled, unscrewed the lid, and poured a little coffee into the inspection tray. The officer nodded. The thermos went to the side table anyway. Policy says if an image looks wrong, you scan the container empty. They did. Same dense shape. The officer tapped the base. It sounded solid. He twisted. The bottom moved, just a hair. A second officer took the thermos, gripped the steel, and turned hard. The false bottom popped loose with a soft sigh. Inside was a narrow cavity lined with waxed paper. In the cavity, 4 wraps of gray tape, a bag of tiny SIM cards, and folded sheets of glossy paper cut into neat rectangles. The maintenance worker didn't run. He went very still. In later interviews, he would say a man he met at a local bar offered him a few $100s per run, said it was just tobacco, said everybody does it. He said the phones were for family calls. He said the paper was legal mail. He said he never asked questions. The arrest at the gate wasn't the end. It was the fuse. Once that false bottom came loose, everything came out with it. The tool chest cavity wasn't clean anymore when investigators checked it again. A dust pattern showed recent scraping. The prepaid cards lined up with cash deposits from 3 family accounts tied to inmates on the drone tier. The outside driver's phone, searched with a warrant, held GPS pins dropped in a rectangle of woods 200 yards from the yard fence. The braid was there, plain now, air for phones, paper for drugs, people for both. The strand at the maintenance gate was the one they could cut today. That night, the prison came off full lockdown and moved to controlled movement. Visits stayed suspended. Vendor deliveries were rerouted and researched. The warden stood in front of a camera and said the line every warden says when the public asks how this can happen in a maximum prison. We stop what we find. And we find what we look for. What he didn't say, what he couldn't say on camera, was what the SIS sergeant told his team in the evidence room when the door was closed. We just cut one strand. The others are going to pull tight. Because somewhere inside, someone still owed for a bundle that disappeared under a rec yard drain. Somewhere outside, a second driver was wondering why the gas station rendezvous got called off. And somewhere in a different mailroom across the state, another envelope with 2 shiny paper was already on a conveyor, headed toward a different tier with the same kind of hunger. The thermos case had cracked something wide open, not just in that one facility, but across the entire state system. Within 48 hours, similar reports started landing on desks in other prisons. Mailroom anomalies, false bottom containers, and kitchen deliveries that didn't match inventory logs. It wasn't one facility's weakness. It was an entire network that had been quietly evolving for years. When the Department of Corrections Internal Affairs joined the investigation, the story stopped being about a single maintenance worker. The question changed: how many people does it take to move contraband through maximum security? The answer, investigators discovered, was simple: not many. One insider to open a gate. One courier to deliver supplies. One handler to manage communications. And one person on the outside who knows how to pay. Coded language wasn't new, but what shocked the team was how professional it sounded. These weren't random criminals improvising. They were using the same kind of lag codes and handoffs that federal agents saw in cartel cases. Some of the voices even used law enforcement terms: run suppression, window clean, unit lock. They spoke like men who understood the system from the inside. That was when the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force stepped in. The Bureau had been tracking drone drops in several states, from Georgia to Ohio to Texas, but this new line wasn't about technology, it was about trust. Every sealed facility relies on one fragile rule: that people who work there don't help what's inside get out, or what's outside get in. When that line breaks, even slightly, the whole structure becomes paper thin. And so the agent started where contraband almost always begins: the mailroom. 4 months, people had joked about mail that makes you high, but the data now showed patterns that were impossible to ignore. At least 6 maximum security prisons across 3 states reported sudden increases in medical emergencies after mail call. Inmates collapsed in their cells, hallucinating or convulsing, sometimes requiring hospital transfer. When tests came back, traces of synthetic drugs were found in the paper fibers of letters, most coated with K2, a lab-made chemical far stronger than natural cannabis. Officers learned to fear even touching it. In some cases, exposure could cause dizziness or nausea. The paper was only the second layer. Behind it, agents began connecting patterns in commissary transactions, specifically, accounts where money orders appeared immediately after drug incidents. Inmates don't use cash. Every purchase is tracked digitally, so when commissary accounts suddenly jumped by hundreds of dollars without outside deposits, red flags went up. Someone inside was laundering value through food purchases and favors, essentially using chips, candy, or coffee as currency for contraband. One officer joked bitterly during an interview: "Coffee's the new crypto." Every item had value. Every item could be part of a trade chain. An instant coffee could buy a phone call. A bag of chips could buy information. And if you controlled the flow of those goods, you controlled the tier. But the investigators found something darker still: the vendors themselves. When one of the task force analysts overlaid delivery schedules, they found a pattern almost too neat to be coincidence. A specific food distributor, a legitimate company under contract with the state, had employees with family members connected to inmates. 2 delivery trucks, same routes, same days, week after week. And yet, each time a truck came through, surveillance cameras showed the same 30-minute equipment check period where doors were closed and cameras conveniently blocked by the truck's position. That's when one investigator decided to check the vehicle logs. Each truck carried a digital GPS module meant to track mileage. One had a gap of nearly 45 minutes, meaning the tracker had been disabled. They confronted the driver. At first, he claimed he didn't know anything. Then they showed him a photo, the drone from Chapter 1, the same gray tape, same pattern. His eyes gave him away. He confessed that he'd been delivering special packages for almost 8 months. The packages came from an unknown contact who left them at a rest stop on the highway. He'd pick them up, stash them inside hollowed food containers, and drive them into the facility as part of his regular load. In exchange, his brother, an inmate in a different prison, got commissary credits and protection. The system was far deeper than anyone expected. It wasn't just greed. It was coercion, families used as leverage, staff manipulated or threatened into becoming mules. Once the task force mapped the connections, the scale was staggering. Drugs moved through mail, food trucks, staff pockets, visitation bags, and sometimes, bodies. Medical staff in multiple states confirmed that smugglers had inserted tiny balloons of narcotics internally, often using them as insurance against violent debts. When one burst in a Florida facility, it triggered a fatal overdose and a full-blown federal probe. Every method the investigators uncovered raised one question: how much more is still getting in? In one of the most surreal cases, a trained prison dog was caught failing his narcotics detection test, deliberately. His handler, later indicted, had been bribed to feed the dog before searches, dulling his sense of smell long enough for packages to slip through. That revelation shook the department. If even the dogs could be neutralized, what chance did the system have? By the end of that month, over a dozen staff members across multiple institutions had been suspended or charged. Some for corruption, some for negligence, some for simply looking the other way. But for all the arrests and reforms, one fact remained: the supply chain didn't stop. Because for every guard arrested, another was hired. For every drone intercepted, another flew the next night. And for every mail scanner installed, someone found a new chemical formula invisible to detection. "You can't stop it," he says. "You can only trade who runs it." That statement became the cornerstone of the final chapter's investigation, one that revealed how entire operations were being orchestrated from inside the prison walls, using contraband phones and encrypted communication with networks on the street. And this time, it wasn't just about money or drugs. It was about power, who controlled it, and how deep the corruption really went.